Welcome to the next edition of Chic Talk. Amazing actress Connie Nielsen is hosting us in her home and has granted us an interview. So we're super, super, super excited to have this chance to talk to you. I wasn't aware that it seems like you got your start through your mom.
Yeah.
Because she was an actress in Denmark.
That's right.
So we'd love to know more how you're beginning and how you started and how you actually managed to turn it into a career.
I was very lucky that I grew up in a home that was full of creative people, and they encouraged us to be creative. Maybe we should take that over again. That's my dog, Dexter.
Unless we keep it real.
Who came home. The dog walker just brought him back. He was a good one. So our house was just a very creative house. My mom was the sort of prima donna in this little review and variety show that we had every summer. It's an old theatrical tradition in Denmark, and it involves poking fun at politicians and anybody who is kind of notable. It's got a little bit of a absurdist bent, and so it's a kind of fun thing to get into when you're a kid, and it also kind of teaches you to look at everything with sort of a more critical perspective. How do we know what we know? Are we sure that we're not being manipulated, etc.? And I think that's a really healthy thing to teach young people, to kind of be sure that you really know what you think you know.
Yeah. Question
authority,
yeah.
But not just authority. Question even your own perceptions. Why do you think you think this way, or why do you think you know what you think you know, and how do you know that you really know what you think you know?
Yeah.
And that was the kind of household I grew up with. When I was 15, my mom let me have my first little passage on stage, and I was the number girl between acts, where in one of the sketches where we were poking fun at the Eurovision contest, which is famously cheesy, and we showed that, and it was daunting to get up on a stage when you're 15, in front of all of the parents of my peers and our whole little city, and I think that's good training too. It's good to learn to overcome your fears, and that was really sort of how I got started.
I think with an acting career, and I recently, from one of the girls from Orange is the New Black cast, they keep calling them an overnight success, especially since the one in the SAG Awards, I believe. And so she had posted on her Facebook, my overnight success took 12 years and this much hard work and da-da-da. So I think for actors that are able to turn their acting career into something that's sustaining, there's always that one pivotal role that helps maybe push them a little on the other side, so that it leads to more and more work.
Of course, and I do think that is true. I think that there is that moment when you keep on pushing, and you keep on pushing, and it is true to a certain extent that luck has a lot to do with when that door finally opens. But so I think that it is very important to keep on working hard at yourself and at your art. I think the time it takes before you kind of hit it big is really also important preparation time. I personally sat and recited, I think, the entire work of Shakespeare aloud, every role, male, female, child, ancient, oracle, whatever. I recited them all of the characters in my own bed, and I went to numerous acting schools to continue maintaining my craft between movies, or between those first films where you weren't sure if you had made a mark yet, and so that also is really important, being able to push yourself to become always better. I think that's another thing to do your due diligence.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you feel you had that one pivotal role that helped generate more work for you?
Of course, yeah. I think that, of course, Devil's Advocate was probably the first role that kind of put me on the map in America. You know, I had just arrived in America a month practically before I met with the director and the producers, and then I went through the very long casting process, which involved numerous tests and screen tests, etc., and jangled nerves and so on.
Say that requires nerves of steel.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Well, actually, it just requires being okay with having a daily nervous breakdown.
So early in your career, did you ever have doubts, like, of what decision you had made going towards acting? Like, if you faced rejection, did you ever feel like you maybe should do something else, or did you always know, like, you wanted to stay course?
Yeah, I don't think that was ever. I just sort of make sure that I don't prepare for option B. I guess I really focus exclusively on option A. You know, it's sort of. I was teaching my son how to flip pancakes the other week, and I said, okay, you got, you know, when you're just about to flip it, you're just going to say to yourself, I will not fail. And he was like, how about I do it opposite? How about I pretend that I'm saying I will not fail, but I will fail. And so when I say I will fail, I will not fail. I said, that might work. But then it didn't work. I said, let's try I will not fail. And he was like, I will not fail. Boom. And I was like, so I guess it's sort of like, yeah, I will not broker, you know, the other option is kind of the thing. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's important.
I do know you've had quite the working relationship with Lars von Trier, who here in the U.S. is known to be quite controversial. And
they're a great production company and just a really important cultural center, I think, for a lot
a very unique
of
vision and what they've created with the collective and directors and having them spread out throughout Europe.
Everywhere.
And
there's a kind of world cinema that doesn't really belong to a single nation or even space. It just is part of like a more global voice that does express the local voice, but it is a local voice that knows that it's speaking to a wide audience, you know, that goes beyond that local place.
Yeah, it's a transcendent story.
And even when it's maybe particular to our culture, as some of the films have been, Brødre, in fact, was very particular to a Danish culture, but everybody knows what war is and what war does to a family.
So you know how some directors and actors have like a muse relationship where they work together ongoingly. Do you feel you have found that with anyone, or would Zentropa probably be it?
No, I don't. I don't think that is really necessarily something that's like an ongoing thing anyway. I think that it's a continuous development.
And are you interested in ever writing, producing, directing? Is that in the
when
works
I'm
for
ready
you?
to show you what I've got, then I'll talk about that.
Sounds good.
We wanted to find out more about your nonprofit that you work on.
So 4 years ago, as part of another Danish movie, I found myself in the slum of Kibera, which is the second largest slum in East Africa. It lies sort of at the heart of Nairobi and is a very large, sprawling ghetto almost, surrounded by extreme wealth and an extraordinary city that is Nairobi. It is a very modern city and it's a boom town. The economy of Kenya is growing, I believe, at 6% right now every year, and that is huge. In comparison, I believe the American economy is growing at 3.5%. I'm not sure.
Okay,
I might be wrong. You might want to check that, but that's what I believe. So it's definitely a very strong economy right now, and so it makes it far worse then to see that there are pockets of people in the city who despite being surrounded by functioning municipal services, have access to none. And it's important that we understand that there's many people in Africa. In fact, 60% of people in Africa are living without access to sanitation, but most of them live in rural areas. And in rural areas, it's an issue that can be dealt with, but it's not an issue you can deal with without running into many problems when you have hundreds of thousands of people living squashed together on 2.5 kilometers square. And that is what we have. These banks that lead down to the Nairobi River are choked with garbage and with human effluent, and children grow up on top of this type of environmental, toxic environmental situations. Is in fact, almost 19% of children in Kibera die before they turn 5. And that is almost unimaginable. I don't know if if you can imagine that of your friends or of your village, 20% of the children would die before they're 5. I mean, it's unimaginable, and yet that is the fact. But furthermore, the lack of access to clean water creates a situation that creates a cyclical, sort of a cycle of misery, if you will. If you drink unclean water, you can be the strongest, smartest, most driven person, but you cannot be productive. Your productivity is hurt by you're getting so sick.
Yeah.
You can't go to work if your kids are very ill, and if you can't go to work, then you can't earn the circa $1.50 that most people in Kibera are trying to live on. Again, another thing that people don't understand when we say that people are living on $1 a day. They don't get that dollar every day. They get that dollar, maybe they get $3 one day, and then they don't get any money for another 4 or 5 days, so then they have to borrow. And that borrowing costs money. In fact, some economists have written an incredible, Daryl Collins has written an incredible book with her group called The Portfolios of the Poor, and I really urge everyone to read it. It's a very interesting, very arresting read, and it talks about the fact that for many poor people, it costs them 5 times as much money that they actually earn to live on that money. So it's extremely expensive to be poor.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind. And then how do people then get out of this poverty? When I was shooting Lost in Africa, I got to work with a lot of people who live inside of Kibera. And it's one thing to walk through a slum or drive by a slum and see the misery and feel terrible about it, but how can you make a difference, right? It's another thing to sit down and eat lunch and dinner and have deep conversations, because that's what happens when we do films. We treat sometimes lofty matters and we engage with all of our hearts and souls in these films, and so the conversations that you have tend to go kind of deep. Well, when you're doing that with people who are living in circumstances that are so vastly different from yours, you cannot help but get engaged. You see that person is just as real, and that life is just as real as yours. In fact, 1 billion people around the world live like that.
Yeah.
In mud huts that have no electricity, or pirated electricity that can sometimes be worse because people die from that. It starts fires. They have no piped water. And the drinking water that they do get is often contaminated. And then there is the environmental burden as well. What to do? When I was going around on one of my Sunday walks around Kibera, the elders approached me and asked through their representative, William Agutu, if I would build a well for them. And we started looking around where that might be, and I said, yeah, I'll do it. I'll build a well. And so I went home after the film, and people often think it's funny, but I'm not ashamed to say that I'm just like everybody else. I had no clue as to how I was going to build a well in Africa. moreover. To do it here, I would probably hire a good company, but I wanted to know what are some of the issues that are involved with building and maintaining, moreover, these wells. Well, that was an interesting Google search, because it turned out that firsthand there was no information. There was nobody who were doing these wells that were providing any hands-on information about how other people might want to do that. And number two, it turned out that building a well in Africa entails a much more serious problem, which is, how are you going to maintain that well? It turns out that, in fact, wells, when you build them, and just like any other infrastructure project that doesn't have within it a considered business plan, does not survive in the long term. And I was looking into, okay, then what's the business plan that would make the well make sense, and so it can become financially sustainable in the long run, and therefore pay for its own maintenance. That too was problematic, because water in effect is not necessarily very good business, not when you're just giving piped water. There also are the problems with, is it even maybe wrong to charge for water? Is water maybe a given human right? Should it be a human right? It turned out to be a very complex problem. If you really, really wanted to do it well, then it's complex. And so I came up with trying to solve many, many different issues regarding aid and development, not least which is it in fact at all helpful to people you're trying to help, that you help them? And if you're trying to help nonetheless, then how can you best do so without removing from your stakeholders their rights, their dignity, and, or worse, make them dependent on you? How do that? That was really the question that I came to pose. And that set in motion a whole lot of things. We started with the building. How were we going to create an infrastructure process that would help the environment that we were working in? The environment that we were working in was reeling from the burden it was already supporting. Two, how are we going to use the appropriate technology for this kind of place? Well, this kind of place meant that I needed to be independent as well. I needed to be autonomous as a provider. I had to exist outside of systems, in view of the fact that inside of the slum, the systems weren't necessarily being provided by the municipal services. And I had to make sure that I involved my stakeholders every step of the way. So it was a question of building up an enormous amount of technology knowledge on one hand that allowed us to build an infrastructure center that could serve not just water, but in fact provide revenue streams from many, many different services in one central location, saving our customers time, pricing it at a price that was completely contiguous to their lifestyle and their economies, and at the same time make them owners. But you can't just give something to somebody and expect that they know how to own and maintain and take care of that. So it involved a lot of capacity building. And so I kind of see here H&P is technology, and we have this incredible board and membership of these incredible brains that help us provide this technology to the poorest people on the planet. We have our stakeholders and that whole organization that has gone through an enormous amount of training and are now, in fact, the leaders and managers of this amazing center that we have built. And then you have this whole ownership process, the development corporation that will allow the poorest people on the planet, in fact, to own their own infrastructure assets and build more and leverage those assets into more assets. And that, in a nutshell, is what Human Needs Project is. And we opened in 2014, July 2014. we had 6 months where we were still working very hard to get all of the structures to work right. And since March 2015, we have been using all of the services, all 11 or 12 services that we have going for us. And we have education for skills. It's adult education, it's skills training, it's job placement, and it's contiguous right next to a credit savings and loans bank that we've made ourselves. Our own stakeholders have created. We have 1,600 savers already. It's right next to the computer room where we have high-speed internet. Honestly, we have optic cable attachment inside of the slum, and 20 computers where we also hold courses. And what we do is that we kind of focus our education on what do people in Kibera need in order to be able to access this economic boom around them, instead of staying with hard physical work that they cannot count on and that hardly pays them at all. We're giving them technical skills, 21st century skills, and working with a whole slew of really amazing people to bring the very, very latest of technologies to them for them to learn. In fact, we won a contest for the first 3D printer that I think has ever been placed in a slum. And a few weeks ago, they printed their first prosthetic hand. Oh, wow. And they're still going to work on putting together the actual movement of the hand, but that has been printed, at the center through our work with Tuna Panda. We have many educational skills trainings programs in those rooms. We also have a public health information kiosk so that anybody can go in with their program and reach out into the community, and the community can reach into the public health campaign and learn everything about AIDS prevention, hand washing, parenting techniques, nutrition. It's very hard to feed kids what their brains and bodies need when you have $1 a day, let me tell you. And then as part of that cycle of self-development that we set up, it is this act of what do you need in practical terms in order to get a job that's well paying. Well, first of all, you get those skills over here. Then you go so you sign up for your courses here. You go into the computer center right next door, and we help you open up your first email account. If you're going out to ask for a job and you don't have an address and you don't have an email address, how are they even going to tell you if they're going to want you? And then, opening up a savings and loans account. Then in preparation for going to work or coming home from work, you can stop by the female showers or the male showers. We have 24 showers, I think 24 showers, and people can go in there and get ready for work or get cleaned after their work. You can use the bathrooms, and there's the laundry where you with real machines, laundry machines, as well as hand washing, where you can get all of your clothes ready for going to work. All of this is, of course, inside a social space where there is a cafe. We asked La Marzocco, which makes probably the world's best cappuccino machine, to donate a machine to our cafe, and they love the idea of providing first-class cappuccinos to people living in slums, and people are using it. And they also gave us barista training for all of our managers, so you can literally walk into Kibera and get the world's finest cappuccino, and I kid you not, I am not exaggerating one bit. It comes with all the beautiful leaves or hearts or whatever, and the foam, so you betcha, it's amazing. So that's a whole slew of services. We also have a green marketplace where local entrepreneurs can develop products and distribute them through the center, and we allow for example, our collaboration with the Rail Labs at UC Berkeley to bring some of all of the product development that they come up with, the graduate students, and bring that into the slum and be produced in the slum at the local price point, and then distributed and sold through us into the community. So you can see what started out as looking for a way to make a business plan feasible and create assets that would be community owned and decentralized through the use of clean technology, turned into this incredible center that is now seeding itself in so many ways. And this is our pilot project. We're working over the next 2 years to come up with the business metrics that will prove our plan, and then we will go to scale.
What I think is incredible, especially hearing the in-depth story of the Human Needs Project, because I hadn't heard all that backstory, and I think that's what adds, that it brings home the impact of the work you've done, and it also brings to life the old adage between, do you teach a man, give him a fish, or do you teach a man to fish? And you really figured that out, because it's very easy for someone to try to put a little band-aid on the problem, fuel their ego, say, okay, I did enough, and walk away. But you took it that extra step to really make an impact. And then when you say to take it to scale, is it then to see if you can make it sustainable? And
well, our first scale program would be to do it in 5 different locations and situations around the world, and really test our model on different cultures, and also even try to test it on a rural community. And finally, we also want to see how this module could work in emergency situations, just because we feel that if we look at refugee camps, I think one of the things that would be really helpful when people are in refugee camps, whether for a war or due to environmental like storms, etc., it would be nice to be able to help elevate people through education while they're in these camps to basically become the masters of their own destinies, instead of feeling as helpless as a person must feel when they are made to live in this type of situation, out of which I just want to try to see how we can apply that method towards that kind of situation. And as I said, that is a couple of years into the future, but that is where we go next. And I think once we have tested over the next 2 years, then after that, on these other locations, then I think we're ready to go to scale. Yeah, there are, as I said, 1 billion people, and all I guess I'm trying to do is to come up with an alternative to either government-owned, centralized delivery of infrastructure versus the corporate-owned, for-profit model of infrastructure delivery of necessary basic services. And both these models have several problems. The model of the corporate delivery of these basic services that are therefore also essential services has proven problematic in many areas, because the profit motive puts an unnecessary burden on the poorest customers. They cannot, in fact, pay. In many, many cultures, water is a God-given right, and there is a feeling that a corporate service is interfering with their right to have the water that is falling from the sky, not least because some corporations actually, made it illegal to collect rainwater, which seems a little bit like very bad choices. So I'm just saying there are these 2 models right now, and I suppose that I feel that with the advent of clean technology, it makes it possible for us to make smaller, decentralized infrastructure centers that perhaps don't deliver the level of quality into people's homes that we are used to in our place, but that would deliver at a different quality level the basic and necessary services that people need and deserve in order to develop their own lives.
well, I think what the difference between the models that you explain, the corporations versus government, and yours, is that yours gives them back their dignity. It's not stripping them away of their dignity, which is incredible. And I love the vision that you have to take it further and in different environments, because I was under the impression that it was to maybe expand within Africa, but the fact that your vision is so global, I think, is incredible and definitely necessary. And when you mentioned the refugee situations, that never even crossed my mind. So I think that's incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you're making an impact on their lives, where you're providing the basic needs, but then you're giving them hope, which is, one of the biggest gifts anyone can give to another person, because then they can strive and aspire for themselves, and then continue to make an impact on other people and help them in the same way. It's a really beautiful
You
project.
also have the Road to Freedom scholarships.
That's right.
And then was that an offshoot of Human Needs? Did it happen concurrently?
That happened concurrently. As part of my engagement with Kibera, you cannot help but walk past these children, and I just have a real soft spot when it comes to kids, and I absolutely enjoy the faces of little children and their this immediacy they have. As an actor, I always strive to accomplish this feat of becoming as direct in my emotions as children are. I love the sheer truthfulness of their way of behaving and thinking. And again, it's there are many difficulties with regards to educating, particularly girls, but also boys. In addition to that, kids living in slums, and with some of the issues that also come from living in a place where there's a lot of disease, it is tough. It is tough to see how many orphans there also are in Africa, and coming up with a solution, I think, is important. I think that how I saw it was, instead of trying to remove children from where they're from, I wanted to see if I could figure out a way to keep them in their communities. In Africa, a family is an extended unit. It is a unit that goes beyond your parents, not unlike ours, but they just really work harder and are very united in and around these kids. And so many orphans are in fact raised by their aunties or uncles of the family. And I wouldn't want the kids who get into our program to lose that contact. I also don't want people to lose the contact with the slum. And that might sound weird, but if you're meeting a kid from the slum, then that is part of that kid's identity.
Yeah.
If that kid's family members are living in that slum, then it's my opinion that that is part of that kid's background, and that it is important to teach the child that though it is a very problematic place, it is also, in my opinion, a place of great creativity and therefore of hope. And to me, it's important that I teach the children that I work with that I'm proud of where they come from. I'm proud of Kibera. I'm proud of the Kiberans I know and I work with. And I'm a total fan of the people that I work with there. And I don't want them to feel any shame. That is hard for them because there is a certain cultural and there's a stigma involved in many, many places where you have slums. There's a stigma involved in being from the slum. And I emphasize to everybody who works both with H&P and with Road to Freedom scholarships that, in my opinion, slums really can be argued to have hosted some of the greatest artistic revolutions in Europe and America. Quasi-slums or slums on the verge of gentrification have hosted all of our artists throughout the ages and continue to do so today as for the same reasons they always have. And therefore, I want slums to also be seen as the vibrant potential, the vibrant place of expressing human potential as well. And all we have to do is allow people access to ways in which to reach an audience and to reach a place where their talents can come to fruition. And again, that's what we do with Road to Freedom scholarships. But we put them in boarding schools, and elite boarding schools in Nairobi, where they, in fact, are schooled together with the elite of Kenya. And I think that there is here a meeting, not just for the slum kids to meet with the children of the elite and understand that, there are kids just like me, and everybody has problems, and there is, they have this issue, well, I have this issue, and I teach them to be proud of themselves and to never feel, like victims because of where they're from, never be ashamed of their provenance, But I also believe that, it's important for children of the elite and perhaps their parents to meet the children of the slum so that they understand that that is not some abstract thing, that their lives are not some abstract misery that they don't have to engage with. And then ultimately, my kids will one day graduate. This year, Yema Khalif is graduating from Dominican University, and he has been an extraordinary student. He has been an incredible part of the cultural and academic life at Dominican University in San Rafael. I'm immensely proud of him. I think RFS and all of RFS kids are, of course, immensely proud of him. But I want it to be clear that there was no one who could have foreseen that Yema would go and become the star student. It wasn't on his high school diploma. His grades were average, actually just a little bit not so good, because it is immensely hard to study when you are hungry. Or many kids in the slums, you cannot measure whether they're going to be good students or not, because many times they haven't had the appropriate schooling on the way up. So then where do you start? You're going to just let that person go because they somehow didn't know how to focus when they were hungry. I'm just trying to say that scholarship programs have to be aware of how they believe they can focus their investment. It's not necessarily easy to know which kid is going to perform best in school. And so what we look for is really more who's most needy, who has the most pressing need right now.
Well, what I loved about what you said too, on so many levels, when you were talking about it goes down to very basic spiritual principles. If you break it down to energy, great contrast in your life experience comes the biggest desire, and out of that, if you are focusing the mind away from shame and all that and just fine-tune that focus, there's really nothing that you can't achieve. And I think that's what is key from what you're telling us about the program, is that there's a nurturing of this human spirit that's happening that you don't often see, especially with emphasizing the fact that there's no shame in being born to where you're born. There's no shame in being poor. There's no shame in being in a slum. It's no limits to what you can do, and I think that is incredible.
Thank you.
I'm very moved by your story.
Thank you.
How many children do you have in the program?
In the program right now we have 19.
That's
the youngest
incredible.
is a 2-year-old baby, and the oldest is Yema, who is about to graduate at 20.
So if you had to put a call to action out there, what would your call to action be?
I would ask people, ask yourself, are you interested in education and giving children a leg up? It's a girlfriend of mine once said, it's the cost of a pair of Louboutins to educate a kid. So, it's not in everybody's position, in everybody's disposition to, or even, economic ability to buy a pair of Louboutins. But, everybody can help with just a little bit. And helping with just a little bit of money, you will know, first of all, that everybody at RFS are working completely for free. Everybody is doing their work. Everybody in the entire committee is working for free, except on the ground. Of course, all of our staff on the ground is paid because they are slum people and they need to live. But even there, you see an immense understanding of, even among the poorest on the planet, they continuously are generous and give to each other and support each other and work for free. And that is a great lesson for all of us. So I would ask anybody to look, what can you spare every year? Give it to a program that you really care about. If you're interested in our program, please come and check out our program, both online at www.humanneedsproject.org or at www.roadtofreedomscholarships.org. And you'll see just how easy it is to participate. We're also completely open and transparent groups, and we are always looking for volunteers. It's a very, very open process, and people are really allowed to engage in a very direct way. It's not the kind of thing where you mail in a check and maybe you get like a handwritten note from somebody, living on the other side, you can really, really come in and participate and know exactly where your dollar goes and how it helps empowering people rather than just helping them. To me, the distinction is really important.
Yeah, I wanted to know what are your next upcoming projects for you?
So I've made a really great movie called The Runner. It's a political dark satire, and it'll probably be coming out this summer. I have also just finished my run at The Good Wife, and now I'm on my way to just finished also shooting Ali and Nino, which is this big sort of epic about some of the key moments in the Caucasus just around the First World War, the urge to self-determination of some of those post-empire satellite states in that area. And, we're talking about Azerbaijan, Armenia, the Georgians, all of these little states that we see, there are some issues still going on there, and it's a very important and interesting thing to look at what is the historical background to some of these conflicts. And then I'm going to go in and do a movie called Le Confessioni, which is an Italian film that kind of deals with this strange thing that we have a lot of democratic states participating in undemocratic processes when it comes to some of the most important decisions regarding our economies. Yeah, so.
It's amazing how you have all these projects on top of these amazing nonprofits that you've spearheaded.
I don't sleep much.
And children in the mix too.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it easier. Yeah.
Do you have any words of wisdom that you would love to impart to?
I wouldn't presume to know anything. I really wouldn't. I really just think that what works for me is to mix it up in my life and to really just I enjoy what I do. It gives me great joy to be able to work with all these different types of people. It's really a great thing to see the start of this business. I have to say it's something that I wouldn't have experienced had it not been for my meeting with Kibera. So that too has been incredibly interesting. I think being an entrepreneur is a lot more fun than people realize. And I think there's no reason to think that being a creative person in any way hinders you from being also an entrepreneur.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all this with us. And
thank you.
Just so you know, we're always here on the sidelines clapping you
Thank
on
you.
and applauding you. It's been totally a pleasure and an honor to be able
Thanks
to
so much.
have this talk with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.